It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, mate, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Welcome once again to this is episode 15 of Hats and High Viz, where we look at local politics, media and sport. And joining me today is, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack, all the way in Hong Kong. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. It's a bit warm up here, I've got to tell you. I just checked my phone. We have a thing here that says feels like. It gives you
Yes.
just how hot it is. And it's only 10 o'clock in the morning, but it's already on 40. So I'm happily tucked up here with the aircon running, mate.
Another mate, a North Melbourne boy, was watching from Hong Kong, from a restaurant in Hong Kong, I believe, and he said it was pretty messy on Saturday as well, pretty hot, and too hot for the yacht club, he said. So he had retreated to a restaurant to watch his beloved North Melbourne have a rare win. And we'll talk a little bit about that later.
Well, I was in the pub on Saturday watching the Wallabies lose to England, and looking at the remnants of the crowd who'd been watching Ireland beat the All Blacks.
Oh dear, yeah, I didn't catch that one. Look, as per usual,
I think it's the first time in some 30 years that someone's won a series against the All Blacks in New Zealand, but the Irish have pulled it off, and they've now won 5 of their last 8 tests against the All Blacks. So
that is a huge win. A nation of just 3 million people, Jack. But I suppose they're playing a nation with just 3 million people anyway. But absolutely mad rugby. But in Ireland, they play all sorts.
They do.
As usual, I just want to remind our listeners that if you like what you're listening to at Hats and High Viz, give us a review on your podcast app, and also if we love some feedback, even if it's just vicious and abusive, we'd love.
We especially like that.
You got a masochistic streak in us, but yes, you can get hold of us at the Conditional Release Program at gmail.com with any comments that you'd like to make. We'll be dealing with a listener letter towards the end of the program, but you can also get hold of me on Twitter at Jack the Insider. DMs are open. It might take me a couple of days, but I will reply. Now, Jack, COVID is rearing its ugly head in Australia again. We've got 97% of people vaccinated, 2 shots, very low uptake on the booster, and recently we've gone to a second booster for those aged 30 or more. That was brought in last week, and as the state of play at the moment, Jack, is 43,000 cases in Australia in the last 24 hours. That's probably under, because people are using RAT tests and may not be reporting. So it suggests that's well under. But nationwide, 43,000 recorded cases across the country, 328,000 active cases across the country. Only 4,602 in hospital, and I say only because that's going to cause a major problem in our health system throughout the country. Only 144 in ICU. In terms of cases, we are where we were on Australia Day, and for those who may have forgotten, that was a time of great upheaval too, with supply routes into food stores and supermarkets and things like that being broken down. We're still seeing that now.
This puts Australia in about the same position as Singapore at the moment.
Right. Okay.
Singapore's got about 15,000 cases yesterday, I think, but it's not quite the same size as Australia. And they've got a few less people in ICU, but in much the same situation.
There's an absolute, smorgasbord of sub-variants of the Omicron virus that people can get. And what we're seeing now is
everybody wants their own variant. That's why.
No, there's one coming from India that we've been told to be a little bit cautious about because COVID was allowed to run rampant there for a long time. But we've seen reinfection rates. WA, Western Australia, just brought in. They said that reinfections were unlikely over 12 weeks, but now they've changed their testing regimes to include those in 4 weeks. And anecdotally, I can tell you that people have had COVID, and sometimes they think they've just still got it, but in many cases they're getting reinfected. It means a lot of people missing work at the moment. Obviously, with 43,000 cases, that's just in a day. And so that came to a head yesterday when the National State Council, State Committee got together, and they have approved. In fact, it's been called a flip for the Prime Minister, a flip on the decision to cut payments to casual workers and others who don't have access to sick leave. The payments are $750 per week, split between the state in terms of state and the Commonwealth in terms of who pays them. And Albo copped a bit of a bucketing from Susan Lee, the deputy opposition leader, Jack.
Yeah, well, if I was Albo, I wouldn't be worried too much about that. You just dust yourself off and go on.
I think in the end, the right decision was made. The point that she did make was that we had a sort of 14-day period when these payments weren't made available, and obviously, while COVID was causing all sorts of ruckus in the workforce, this is what she said anyway. He doubled down and said those payments could not be made to her. She was referring to a person who actually was a casual worker and did not receive a COVID payment because she fell ill between July 1 and the 17th of July is when these payments were reinstated. Then Susan Lee goes on to say, now he's dragged kicking and screaming to an emergency rush meeting of National Cabinet, which was held yesterday. Of course, we welcome the reinstatement of the payments, but this is 2 weeks after they stopped. So you get the impression that the opposition is being a little bit opportunistic about this, Jack, because it was them who said that it should stop on July 1.
Well, of course they're going to be opportunistic. They're going to play politics. That's what they're paid to do now. Yeah.
Well, that's what Jim Chalmers said. The Treasurer said it was her government a little over 8 weeks ago that designed this program and wanted it to end at the end of June. They will whinge and they will complain. We will get on with our work.
The thing about this is it's been the same from the beginning of the pandemic. Is that governments are making decisions on the run, and they're not going to get them all right. They just got to change them when they're demonstrably wrong.
The other side of that coin is when you've got casual workers who don't have access to sick leave, and whether they test positive or not, regardless of almost whatever industry they're employed in, they're going to basically suck it up and go to work. And so you do need to have these payments that allow them to stay at home and to isolate and to get better. And so it was a bit of a no-brainer. I drove to and from Canberra from my bolt hole on Friday, and it was all over ABC News that this was a most unfair thing. There was a particularly aggressive interview from the ABC from I'll just think of her name, and she took Mark Butler apart. And basically talked over the top of her. It's most un-ABC-like behaviour. But from the Radio National presenter, a former colleague of mine. So you think I'd know her name, Jack?
I can't remember her either.
Yeah.
And I missed that bit.
Yeah,
I wasn't driving to Canberra on Friday.
It wasn't Alberici, but yeah. Look, it was it was a pretty hot interview. Butler stayed true to the government line at the time, which was we can't afford this on the budget. Bottom line, we've got $1 trillion worth of incurred debt here. And to be coughing up any more was a bit of a problem. But all of that has been overturned.
Patricia Cavalis?
Patricia Cavalis it was. I'm sorry to our listeners for not, Patricia
so
for not remembering her name.
So I've got no problem with governments sticking to the line, at least in public, and then saying, well, look, no, we actually have got it right and we've got to change their mind. You know, if the opposition want to call it a flip or a flop or whatever they want to call it, that's fine.
Yeah, look, in the end, I think the right decision was made, but you really need to be very careful about this because it's an enormous amount of Commonwealth and state money that's being spent, you know. And it needs a process, and you need to be advised. You need to get the current status from health experts on what the best way to go is.
And you haven't got the usual 6 months preparation, which would take to decide an issue like this and to announce it. So you've got to do it in a few days or a week. They're not going to get it all right. So we just have to accept that. Meanwhile, the man from the West, PVO.
Yes. He gave Scott Morrison a bit of a slapping on Saturday. Is that what you're referring to in his column?
Personally, I think PVO's a slightly odd person, even for a Western Australian who's on the project. I mean, that's 2 for 2 for being a bit odd in my view. But he did get stuck into him, didn't he?
He did get stuck into him. I don't think much of it was unfair because I think historically and politically, Scott Morrison is going to have to wear the blame for the election loss.
He is self-evidently the author of his own misfortune.
Yes, indeed he is. And look, I'd recommend to our listeners to have a read of PVO's piece from Saturday. It really was, you are the author of your own demise sort of piece. But the most interesting item from the column is that Morrison, PVO explained, has no great wealth, which we sort of understood, and only has access to standard parliamentary superannuation, which was the great shift in the parliamentary super plan that was sort of engineered by Mark Latham and John Howard in 2004. So he takes away with him superannuation that would not be unlike yours or mine over, I think he joined the parliament in 2007, didn't he? He was elected member of Cook in 2007, I think, if it wasn't a by-election around that. So, yes, he misses out on the golden parachute. Should we be giving our former PMs a bigger pension, Jack?
Well, my attitude to the changes in the superannuation is that it was a Mark Latham idea to wreck our parliamentary superannuation.
It's generally a pretty good sign that it's not a good idea.
Yeah. So that should have a five alarm warning coming with it. If it's a Mark Latham idea, and it's right up there with one of his best. It's a shocking idea. It was a bad plan. It was done for cheap political reasons. Howard felt forced to go along with it, and he did. But it's not improved things one little bit.
There was a time there, Jack, where Mark Latham loomed heavily over John Howard. I don't think he ever passed him as preferred Prime Minister, but Labor were back in the running in 2004 with Mark Latham's leadership. And it's true that the history of this was that Latham, it was really a sort of cheap political shot to see what Howard would do, and Howard panicked and brought in these reforms. So anyone elected post-2004 or 2004 or beyond would just receive a standard superannuation contribution from their own salary that pretty much everyone takes. Politicians should be a little bit different, Jack, not least of all, and this is what we're getting to with Morrison, is that they're not very employable once they're done.
No, and I don't want to see former prime ministers trailing their coat through the corporate world, or worse still, turning up in Beijing, opening doors for Australian companies up there. I think that's unseemly. We have a couple of ex-PMs who've done that, and I don't think they've covered themselves in glory doing it. We have a couple of ex-PMs who've behaved pretty well, I've got to say. But I think we should be returning to the old superannuation scheme.
Yes, and that was basically a Commonwealth contribution. And look, they do have some benefits. It must be said that anyone who loses pre-selection as a sitting member immediately gets a payment of $100,000. Oh well, at the point of the election, because they. Like I say, Christensen in Dawson received a $100,000 payment. He'd almost certainly wasn't going to stand again, but still took the $100,000. Yeah. And so, that's sort of a 6-month cushion. But we don't want to see our prime ministers down at Central Station rattling a tin either, do we, Jack?
No, we don't. No. I think we should have. I think the original super scheme with some adjustments was much better.
Yeah.
Just before we leave Peter Van Onselen, one thing he did say, which amused me about the column, which I think you're right. Our listeners should read the column. But he was talking about how delusional he thinks Scott Morrison has been post the election, and that made me wonder whether Peter Van Onselen has ever heard of a Mr. Kevin Rudd or a Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, if he's worried about former prime ministers being delusional about why they lost office, because I don't think Scott Morrison would get on the podium. Those two would absolutely be on the podium.
I think he's getting. I think he's looking at a bronze, Jack. The issue here is, I mean, Malcolm got railed by his own party. Kevin Rudd was finished off in 2013.
That's absolute rubbish, Jack. They were both absolutely massacred by your employer. Rupert Murdoch destroyed them both.
I'm not sure that is really the case. I think people had a chance to have a good
No,
look.
I've listened to Malcolm and Kevin talk about this, and they're sure this is what's happening.
Yeah, well, they would be, you see. And this is my point. And whether it's Morrison, Rudd or Turnbull or whoever, they cling to this and they create a narrative around their own legacy that is all about their legacy now. Forget the pensions for a moment. They want, and it's always done in a self-serving way. I was terrific, but I was let down by other people.
Or the evil Rupert Murdoch somehow managed to...
That's not something Scott Morrison can go to. No, so his current go-to is, we had a pandemic and, we did our best, but I am basically a victim of the pandemic. But it's okay, Jack. It's going to be okay because Scott Morrison says God has a plan for him. Don't tell me God. I think it's going on the speech circuit and earning lots of money. Would that be it, God? I wonder if God has actually told him. He also characterised anxiety as Satan's plan and called for people to put their faith in Christ over governments in a sermon at the church founded by Margaret Court. Ooh, it's an interesting sort of place. I mean, look, he's still a member for Cook, so he's got some responsibilities, but he seems to be travelling around the country wanting people to pat him on the back.
People do odd things after an election, don't they? Remember Bill Shorten going on a victory lap after he lost?
Yeah, he did do the national tour again, didn't he? I honestly think I was talking about this with not a journalistic colleague, but a friend on Friday, and I really do think the country dodged a bullet there in 2019. What we got, however, was a government that didn't expect to win. They didn't expect to win in 2019, and so when they did win, Jack, they didn't really have a plan. It was, as Paul Keating described it, the point of the Scott Morrison government, according to Paul, was it had no point. It was pointless. And that was kind of it. And so we had sort of 3 years of of a government without any sort of plan and without any sort of narrative to get them through, and then they got whacked with a pandemic early in 2020.
To be fair, in that election, the only plan either of them had, Bill's plan was he wanted to be Prime Minister, and Scott's plan was he wanted to stay Prime Minister.
Well, there's some of the things now that I'm sure any person in Treasury would say were actually good ideas. Were nuked by the coalition, and that is, looking at reforms to tax benefits for shareholders, for people who have a lot of money in stock, and also for all those people who held investment properties, or would go on to hold investment properties from because that was the reform, that the building. That dwellings that were constructed post a certain period. They weren't actually bad reforms. It is a lot of money to be spending on essentially middle class welfare, and maybe those things needed to be reformed. But at the same time, I think if we had Bill Shorten as a Prime Minister, we would have had quite a few problems.
The idea of middle class welfare in Australia generally needs to be looked at. Even before we left the country to move up to Asia, the idea that a pair of lawyers were getting subsidies for childcare struck me as absurd at the time and still does today. As indeed the tax system in Australia needs to be looked at.
Yeah, it does indeed. But the experience of 2019 tells us that parties in opposition can't go for the big reform items. They're going to have to sort of sneak their way into power.
Or if they are going to go to an election with those sort of policies, they're going to need a more impressive leader than Bill Shorten to carry them.
Yeah, that's probably where the blame lies there. So God has a plan for Scott Morrison, Jack,
well,
and I think
I'm pleased for Scott. I'm pleased for Scott.
International speaking circuit with his hand out. And the Libs have another problem, and not just Scott Morrison and when he's going to leave politics or the Parliament, but according to an op-ed in the Australian Today, Linda Reynolds talks about the Libs having a women problem, and it also featured with an editorial in the Oz saying that using gender targets was probably not a good idea. It should come down to the value of the individual. But nevertheless, as Linda Reynolds writes, the Liberal Party has known it has a problem. In early 2016, after several reviews, the party so very quietly, adopted a 50% gender target. And that's something we didn't know, isn't it, Jack? A target that has been in place for the past 3 federal elections. The trouble is that it was adopted so quietly that it has not been implemented by a single state or territory division of the party. This can only be seen as 3 elections of lost opportunities, according to Linda Reynolds. She goes on to say, despite having a target, it is still impossible to have a meaningful conversation within the Liberal Party on gender. This is because nothing strikes greater terror in Liberal men and women than 2 little words, gender quotas. And while Liberal Party members unquestioningly accept so many other forms of quotas, party quotas, faction quotas, state and territory quotas, gender quotas is simply not a topic for polite and, in inverted commas, sound Liberal conversations. It sounds like they're just going to bang their heads over this one, Jack.
Yeah, well, it's a matter for them, really.
Yeah, but I mean, let's talk about the level of representation in the lower house, Jack. It's just appalling. Well, they got 12 or 50, 51 or whatever it is. It's sitting around about 10%. The female representation, and they need to get that fixed. The problem is I don't think they're capable of it.
Well, they either will or they won't, but it's a matter for them. I mean, they've got bigger problems than the women problem at the moment.
I think that is number one problem for the Liberal Party right now.
What they've got to do is something that Peter Van Onselen raised in his column. He thought that the way Morrison was behaving, his delusions could keep the Liberals out of power for 11 years, as indeed Labor was out of power for 11 years after John Howard won in 1996. I think Van Onslo's wrong about that. What kept Labor out of power for 11 years after Howard won in 1996 was that the Labor Party thought that they had lost because the voters got it wrong, and spent the next 11 years, or most of that next 11 years, telling the voters that they got it wrong, and that because Howard largely supported the economic reforms of the Hawke-Keating era, the Labor Party walked away from those reforms and disowned them, despite the fact that they were hugely successful. That's what kept Labor out of power for 11 years, and the Liberal Party got to be careful that they don't get in the same track.
I mean, look, it might have kept them out. I have a different. I know what you're saying. I have a different view about it, but I don't want to get into the history of Labor. I mean, you could say 2001 was an election within the shadows of 9/11 and also some domestic issues around immigration. 2004, Mark Latham. And we've just discussed Mark, and I think he was unelectable. There were some other things working there, but what you're talking about is the same kind of phenomenon. The same sort of delusion that says, oh well, perhaps not that the people got it wrong, but the people might have got it wrong briefly, and then they will turn to the Liberal Party as some sort of, open embrace with a party, the natural party of government in Australia. That's the delusion, I think, and they just seem to be going on about these things. Firstly, they're ignoring the big problem, and that is Scott Morrison, and he's not leaving, and he's making speeches in Seoul about about our relationship with the Chinese. He's popping over to Margaret Court's church and telling us that God has got a plan for him. There'll be people like Peter Dutton saying, I wonder if your plan is to resign as a member for Cook, because that's our first step in getting back. And then we've got these overarching issues of a severe underrepresentation from women within the Liberal Party. And I think while they continue, if this is going to be something that, according to Linda Reynolds, cannot be discussed within the Liberal Party, then they can't go forward. They will stagnate.
Yeah, well, that's something they've got to sort out for themselves. There's a whole lot of things to sort out, but that's not the most important one. The most important one is just get back to being a decent opposition. That's all they've got to do. I
think what a lot of Australians want to see, but it's not necessarily healthy for the Liberal Party, is that they have a profound and public examination of their failures. Now, that's probably not what they want or need, but they are simply just sailing on as if really nothing. A little bit of a hiccup. We've had to change officers. We've gone down the other side in the Parliament. But other than that, we're just going to come out swinging. And I think that's going to piss a lot of people off.
That's a rotten idea. I wouldn't do that for a moment. No, don't have a public self-evisceration. Just get on with being a decent opposition.
I think my major problem with that is that if they come out carping and whining, it's going to go over really badly. So they do need to have some sort of conversation with the Australian people about why they got it wrong and accepting responsibility for it. They haven't done any of that yet. They've just sort of shuffled on us like it's
absolutely the wrong approach. Anyway, we can disagree.
Yeah. Well, I just think they won't be listened to. They could absolutely disappear. Jack, major parties don't have any guarantees on their livelihood going from election to election, and we've seen it in the Western Australian Liberal Party. If you just ignore your problems, you will go away. The problems won't go away. Yeah. You will.
I don't think they'll be disappearing. Anyway,
not just
what else is happening in the world?
Take a couple of elections. Well, when we're looking at Sri Lanka, and while we've covered this, I reckon, better than just about anybody, but
we were onto the story a little bit in front of us.
We were a good 6 weeks ahead on this, and that's that's not due to any great perspicacity on our part. We were just watching. And now everyone's watching Sri Lanka, including us, the Australian media. And we're very Australian-centric in our podcast today, but that's okay. I'm quite comfortable with that. Chris Mitchell wrote a piece, which I'd also recommend people have a look at, very even-handed, actually, and knows what he's talking about. And he says that, the ABC and its flagship 7:30 program has not mentioned the issue of the fertiliser ban as being he said it wasn't a causative factor, but it was a contributing factor to, it's more than economic woes. It's officially called an economic crisis in Sri Lanka. And meanwhile, the right-wing media like Sky and Fox have run off and said that this is all to do with the failure of green policies. ABC ignores it. The right wing goes to town on that fertiliser ban, saying it was really just the big thing that occurred in Sri Lanka. What I liked about Chris's piece was that he looked at all sides, and also looked at that issue of the fertiliser ban and how it arose.
He did miss one important point. Chris, we'll give him a 9 out of 10 for the column. He missed the Easter bombings in the churches in 2019, which had already
it's another
wreaked
thing.
Great havoc on the tourism industry. Because for listeners, Sri Lanka's foreign reserves were coming from really only two sources: tourism and tea.
And tourism and tea, yeah.
And the tourist trade was already struggling post the Easter 2019 bombings before COVID hit. COVID was just the killer blow.
Well, what I did like about Chris's piece is that it was completely balanced about that. So here he says the Rajapaksa government had been mishandling the economy long before the fertiliser decision. There's a Z in there, I don't know why. But anyway, that's American spelling. COVID-19 and the collapse in tourism to Sri Lanka that followed hit the island nation hard. Its main sources of foreign exchange revenue were tourism and agricultural exports. Both have come to a screeching halt, and the country's poorest farmers are feeling the pain most. Soaring global prices for the foodstuffs they can now not grow in sufficient quantity, and the petrol and gas they must import last month forced Sri Lanka into talks, so far unsuccessful, for an International Monetary Fund bailout. That must now wait for a new constitutionally elected government in Colombo, and I think that'll take some time. Anyway, many economists, Chris writes, were sceptical at the time of the Rajapaksa's COP26 commitment, and that's something we'll talk about in a minute, Jack, arguing the government was betting on organic farming because it could not afford to import fertilisers. The Wall Street Journal last week pointed out that even before the pandemic, Sri Lanka had been hit by, and he quotes, an accumulation of debt on infrastructure spending and sweeping tax cuts that drained government revenue, unquote.
I guess my view of it is that other countries have been hit like Sri Lanka has, with loss of tourism and loss of exports and foreign exchange problems. Yeah, Sri Lanka's situation was made much, much worse by the organic decision, the decision to go organic farming. So it was the proximate cause of its present extreme difficulties. They would have been in trouble anyway if the situation was just made a hell of a lot worse.
Yes, that's no doubt about that.
Or, as I said before, organic food is really just for the rich and the very poor.
Yeah, I guess what we're talking about, and we won't know. I mean, firstly, I'd like to say that ban, that fertiliser ban, was lifted in November. So it was really just a 6-month absolute crop failure in tea and rice and other staples in Sri Lanka.
But it will take more than one crop.
Oh, yeah.
For the situation to return to what it was before the ban.
They can't, because we've got a chronic shortage of chemical fertilisers, and two, they haven't got the foreign money to buy it.
Yeah.
That becomes a structural problem. I mean, Sri Lanka has had a structural a balance of payments issues that go back to 1949. And at the end of its civil war in 2009, it focused on providing goods to its domestic market rather than boosting foreign trade. So these problems were looming, and I honestly believe, and we won't know, you would only have to wait for Rajapaksa to say this, and then you probably couldn't believe it anyway. But this decision, the decision was taken on May 2 last year by Rajapaksa to ban fertilisers. It was done without any consultation. And no support for farmers, let alone no support for farmers. But it was done with no consultation. It was just done out of the blue. And that tells me that he's looking at this and going, well, here we can save two or 300 million in imports.
Yeah, and it was also done with the support of, people like Joseph Stiglitz at the World Economic Forum, and what's her name? Vandava Shiva.
Yeah, they applauded it. There's no doubt about that.
They were all cheering it on. So all the do-gooders around the world, the environmentalists, were cheering it on. So beware of people with good ideas, is my view.
Well, it wasn't a good idea, but it seemed like a bad idea at the time, Jack. And that was just the thing, and that's why the COP26 people should sort of be hanging their heads. But yes,
beware of the do-gooders.
It was sold to them without. It was sold to Sri Lankan farmers without any support, without any. You go through reform and you think, okay, well, we're going to consult. 2, we're going to provide provisions and support for this shift in your farming methods. But none of that happened. Yeah. Okay. Jack and I constantly tangle about electric vehicles, and Jack is constantly wrong. But today we have news of a hydrogen vehicle boost.
So says someone who has the gift of faith.
Yeah, no. Look, I honestly believe that electric vehicles are a transition, and that hydrogen is where it's going to be, and certainly in Australia. And the New South Wales and Victorian governments have announced that they will spend $20 million. It's not a lot of money, but it's $20 million on hydrogen refuelling stations along the Hume Highway, Australia's busiest freight highway, in a push to see more zero emissions technology used in the heavy vehicle industry. Hydrogen can move trucks, Jack, and that's the thing. And we've got quite a lot of green hydrogen available in this country. We have some real benefits there. And they will spend $10 million on grants to manufacture about 25 hydrogen-fueled trucks and at least 4 refuelling stations along the 840-kilometre Hume Highway between Sydney and Melbourne, one that I've driven many, many times. Yes, so these things are important, surely. I mean, and we do have an industry set up. We have an industry ready to go, basically, in hydrogen.
If it works, it's great.
And you see most of the, we talked in a around the world program about a week ago, Jack. We talked about Mr. Toyota with a D, Toyoda, who's the big boss at Toyota. And he was having a bit of a swipe at electric vehicles. Toyota don't manufacture an electric vehicle. They are global leaders in hybrid technology, but they are also developing, as is BMW. There's the Audi. There are quite a lot of the major vehicle manufacturers at the pointy end developing hydrogen vehicles now.
That's because there are inherent problems with electrical vehicles, particularly in certain weather conditions. Batteries don't like the cold. So you have an extreme range problem with electric vehicles when it gets very cold. So that wipes out a good deal of the world for using those. That's right. If the hydrogen technology can be made to work and can be made to work in a way that people will use it, good luck.
Yeah. And look, when you also mention electric batteries for cars, there are rare metals in them that are becoming more and more expensive. Australia does provide, I think we've got quite a lot of nickel in this country. I think most of the lithium comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and prices are rising in rare metals, and that means that the cost of the vehicle, because of the cost of the battery, has increased. That's the way it's going. Very good news, Jack, as we turn to sport. Wonderful weekend of sport, as we mentioned, but Cameron Smith, not the Storm captain, now retired, but Australia's...
The man with the mullet.
Yeah, he's got a fantastic mullet, hasn't he? Cameron Smith, he's won at St Andrews. He's won, I think it's the 150th British Open, isn't he?
He has,
and just won it with just came from the clouds.
Well, he was on the leaderboard on the Saturday and had a couple of real bad holes and dropped it back to about 4 behind the leaders. I think 4 shots behind the leaders, but he's reeled off 6 birdies on the back 9, 5 on the trot to win the tournament.
Didn't see the 17th, how he played the 17th. That is a nightmare hole, if you know it well, Jack. You've basically got to fire over the clubhouse onto the fairway. It is very, very difficult indeed. And then the setup to the green. He's got the deepest bunker you can possibly imagine to the left. Very uneven green surface. Very tough.
He had to putt around that bunker.
Did he?
Yeah. And he chose to putt rather than chip. He pulled it off. So he's basically 2-putted from off the green.
It'd be like chipping onto the bonnet of a Volkswagen, you know. I mean, the ball can just go anywhere, and it really is. That's a tough hole, and the back 9 is generally considered to be harder than the front 9. So he's done extremely well. He was he's
quite a character, this fella. He's a Queenslander, and he's a bogan's bogan. There's just no doubt about it. He said, what does he like? He likes fast cars and fishing.
And he also likes beer, Jack, and that's a positive. That's a positive in his character.
And the trophy for the Open is called the claret jug because it looks like a large claret jug.
And he said, "I'm definitely going to find out how many beers sit in this thing. That's for sure." And he's probably already done that already.
Well, he's probably still working on it.
Now the question is, he's just won a squillion, and I think he's the 6th Australian to win the British Open.
Yeah, first for 25 years or so.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and that brings Greg Norman, who had, he sort of lost the unlosable at St Andrews, didn't he?
He did.
But that brings him into play now because Cameron Smith, well, with the win now, is presumably much sought after in what we will call the World Series of Golf. I'm not sure what they actually call it, but the non-PGA tournament that's, I guess, managed or by, or at least he's a serious heavyweight consultant to, Greg Norman. So will Cameron Smith play in the World Series of Golf, the Saudi show? He's said, well, this is Cameron's response to it. I don't know, mate. My team around me worries about all that stuff. I'm here to win golf tournaments. So he's given that one the front foot defence.
My guess is he probably won't.
Probably won't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's going to be much sought after within the PGA for a very long time. So he's going to get invitations basically to every major event and every minor one for that matter for a very long time on the basis of that win. Well done, that man, Jack.
And he's hot. And this is his first major, but he won what they call the 5th major, the Players' Championship, and won that easily. So he's really hot. And besides, there's only so much money you can spend on fast cars and fishing.
And beer. Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. All right. Well, keep an eye on that and see which way he goes. But, the future, whichever way you look at it, is very, very bright for Cameron Smith.
Good luck to him.
Footy, the AFL in particular. And the rule returned with a vengeance. Sack the coach, win the next game. The North Melbourne, not a dry eye in the house, Jack. North Melbourne gave the Tigers a bit of a touch-up for 3 quarters. It always looked like they were going to run out of steam, but they hung in and won by, I think, 3 or 4 points, wasn't it? Less than a goal. And the North Melbourne faithful were bereft with emotion.
Well, look, they did their best. They did their best to lose it towards the end, North, but they were outdone by the Tigers, who did even more to lose
grasp it.
Yeah, there was some. There were a lot of errors at the end,
There were a lot of errors, a lot of pressure. North got the points. It was a strange thing. I didn't know who the coach was. It's Patch Adams, who's played 100-odd games for North Melbourne and then had to retire with concussion. A tough sort of defender. And he was the VFL coach, and John Blakey was one of the assistants at North Melbourne under the sacked coach, and Blakey he wasn't even told he was told by the media that he didn't get the job. So there's some problems.
Blakey's the bloke who coached up in who assistant coached up in Sydney for many
it's a major coup to get him.
In fact, his son is a ripping player for playing on the halfback flank for the Swans now.
Yeah, well, it was a major coup for North to pick him up and put him in their football department. But one would have thought he would be the most likely, but no, it went to the VFL. It went to the VFL coach, Patch Adams. A very strange sort of decision.
Anyway, he probably should retire now. He's got a 100% win record,
I don't think he's raring to go, but the fact that John Blakey found that out in the media was pretty bloody ordinary.
It's also a pretty fair indication that the problems at North Melbourne go a fair bit deeper than the coach.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. So I asked a bit of an insider at North Melbourne. I said to him, well, the only reason you'd sack Noble was because he'd lost the players, and had he lost the players, he said he didn't know. He didn't know, and he would say if he did know. It is one of those things. Now, Jack, you're talking about the most valuable players in the MVPs of the AFL, and you think there's undergone considerable change.
Yeah, well, all of a sudden we're not talking about Dusty or Dangerfield or Nat Fyfe or any of these players. I reckon at the moment the 3 most influential players are Mark Blixabs from Geelong. Chris Scott says he's not a defender. He's a midfielder who can play back, but he also plays in the ruck. Last week against Melbourne, he played in the ruck against Max Gawn, and when he wasn't rucking, he was picking up Christian Petrarca, and when Christian Petrarca was off the ground, he was rolling onto Clayton Oliver. And you think about that, you say, well, this bloke's played on the 3 most important players in the Melbourne side and won.
Yeah, well, overall he won, yeah.
And they've won the game. And this week, he picks up your Paddy Cripps and has a good game on Paddy Cripps as well.
Yeah, and did some rucking around the ground. So how it works is that the Geelong ruckman, who, let's say, bounced down at first moment. What's his name, the big tall blonde fella?
Rhys Stanley.
Yeah, Rhys Stanley. So he'll take the first knock and then he'll just go straight down forward. And the ruckman has to either go, his opposite ruckman either has to go with him or get found out if the ball's delivered to him, or stay in the contest and ruck the next one. So it causes all sorts of problems because Blixarves is a ruckman and he's another utility player. Who else
and a very, very gifted athlete. He can run all day and run at speed. The other bloke, the next one who I think is really come out of nowhere, not come out of nowhere, but all of a sudden become a very important player is Chad Warner from the Swans. His last month
has been spectacular.
Yeah. And the third one is the young Dacos. He's the best first-year player I've seen since Chris Judd.
Yes, the Pies sadly had another win on the weekend.
I remember you and I were both at a West Coast game when Judd first came across to play at the SCG against Sydney, and I know that we were both staggered that this bloke playing his sixth game or something was just picking up the ball in the middle of a pack and running away from the pack with the ball in his hand.
Yeah.
And we were astounded at that as a first-year player, and Dacos is every bit as good.
I think he kicked 5 from the wing in a quarter, Judd. And just thought, no, look, he's not just raring to go. He's actually got the best players in the competition covered.
This is not a promising bloke in his first year. This is a bloke who's ready to go today.
Yeah.
And Dacos is like that. He's ready, mate. He's ready, mate.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with him. As I said, they snuck a win, really. They snuck another win against a very brave Adelaide, who've got, I think they're just really well coached and going really well for the stage in their rebuild they're at. But it was pouring with rain throughout most of the day, and Dacos was he was using the ball like it was dry weather, and everyone else was struggling with disposal efficiency.
Yeah. Anyway, look, his father was a gem, so he looks like he's going well on the way to be.
He's going to be probably more effective because his father was handy around goals, more than handy around goals, must be said.
But he was pretty good in the middle as well.
Yeah, all right. I think that the young bloke might have the old man covered, but we'll see. He certainly debuted spectacularly this season. And to wrap up today, we have a reader letter. In fact, Shane got hold of me on Twitter, which we encourage all people to do. And Shane has asked us about the state of education in Australia. He talks about serious issues of workplace practices, workload and pay in a field that has a clear economic and social benefit. No one could argue that. He says, where have the wheels fallen off? What policies going forward should we consider? Cut funding to private schools, lift teacher pay, make teachers work 38-hour weeks. He's keen to get our thoughts, Jack, so I'll ask you yours. How do we lift Australia's academic achievement, particularly critical skills in literacy and numeracy?
Well, we have to be a little bit careful talking about this, Jack, because in our family there are a lot of teachers, and quite a few of them listen to our podcast, and they mightn't be happy if we start searching teachers at all.
No, absolutely. I mean, when you turn 17 and ask you, so what are you going to teach?
It was a bit like that, wasn't it?
Well, a little bit like that, but yeah. So we do need to be very judicious, Jack. Very, very tactful.
I can remember having a conversation at a sort of semi-public forum with my old pal Julia Gillard about this while she was still in opposition, and she was talking about how she wanted, she was deputy opposition leader, I think, by this stage, she wanted Labor to go back to making politics or making education a winning political issue for the party, which in her view it hadn't been for some time, and I was a bit inclined to agree with that. She herself was a product of a very, very good state high school in Adelaide, and she was decrying the way that, in particular, state Labor governments had sort of undermined the selective and better state public high schools. I think a good deal of the problem Labor's had politically has been because of that.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, we're certainly not going to bag teachers because I honestly think, it is of critical importance that we do have very good teachers at our schools. We know some of them aren't always going to be terrific, and we'll know that from our own experiences, but
that's just human nature. You can't expect everyone in any profession to be all good.
No greater gift to society than a very good teacher and a committed teacher, and committed to the entire classroom. We do find that there's a lot of political playing and culture war stuff about teachers, and we don't know what's being taught to them, and they're being taught all these things about gender and so forth. I think those are things that we really need to get past. But there are some curriculum issues there. I mean, for example, history is being pretty much overlooked in that year 7 to year 10 space. It's often compacted into a social studies thing, which is a combination of geography and social studies and those sorts of things. So you tend to have tend to leave school with not a great understanding of what's happened in Australia in the last 200 years and beyond that, for that matter too. Mathematics and science, never our strong suits, Jack. But what we're starting to see now is a lot more engagement among young girls in maths and science, and that's a thing. One thing I would say that we want to avoid as a society is just compelling our children into this sort of you must succeed. According to mummies and daddies' wishes, you must succeed, and that means you'll have outside tutors. That means you'll do 3 or 4 hours homework a night, and I think we want to avoid those sorts of things. So there are all manner of social problems coming out of those sorts of situations. Some of them you may witness in Hong Kong, Jack, and elsewhere in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I feel sorry for the little kids here. You see them being handed back to the helpers from the bus. They have a bus mum on the bus, and you see these little kids of 3 and 4 who do 2 lots of school a day. They'll do Chinese kindy in the morning and English kindy in the afternoon, or vice versa. And little fellas are asleep when they get home from school because they're just exhausted, and they really should just be playing at that age. I think one of the great cons of our time is this rebranding of childcare as early childhood education. They should just be playing, by and large.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where imagination comes from. Imagination gets developed and those sorts of things. Look, it's an unfortunate thing, and it's just the way the world is that, when kids turn 9, 10, 11, 12, some parents put it off for as long as possible, but then they'll be flipping through the mobile phone. Now, there's all sorts of potential shortcomings to all of that, but then they've got access to this gargantuan library called the internet that where most answers can be derived.
Yeah, we had to make do with a tattered copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica if we were lucky.
My case is about 40 years old.
What I would say is that I think that we need to, do what we can to have great state public schools and great private schools as well.
I'd also add,
I don't think it's an either or argument.
That we really need to revisit the idea of technical schools as well for kids that aren't of an academic bent who can basically decide at a fairly young age, 13, 14, to go off and do a trade or prepare themselves for doing a trade, and that should be driven by, what the skills of the future are going to be.
Our tech skills in Victoria were excellent.
They were excellent in their day, and then they were all sort of disposed of or merged into one sort of.
The idea that every kid needs to go and get a university degree is a mistake.
Well, we need to sort of understand what those skills, when we talk about electric vehicles and all that sort of stuff, Jack, so half jokingly about the great. But if you were going to say to anyone, if you want to have a look at a trade, being an electrician you are never going to be short of work in the future. So yes, an electrical engineer, all these sorts of things. I mean, the other thing to and we've discussed this in previous episodes. And when we get to education, don't think that once you hit your year 12 HSC, VCE, whatever it is that the be all and end all. I mean, it's really just the beginning. And if you don't get a good one, it should not set you back.
No. It's just part of life's rich tapestry, but it doesn't. Your life's not going to be determined when you're 18.
No, that's exactly right. Look, for all that said, I mean, when we talk about failures, I don't think our failures are all that serious. And when I look at young people, whether they're 17, 18-year-old or 8 or 9, they look like pretty good kids, well-adjusted kids for the most part. So we're not getting everything wrong. perhaps a little bit more playtime, Jack. A little bit more playtime outside of the classroom. Give him a footy, Jack. Give him a footy, let him have a kick in the park. All right, thank you very much for your time today, Jack. And we remind our listeners on Hats and High Viz, episode 15, if you've liked what you've heard, or even if you've disliked it, and disliked it intensely, get a hold of us on the Conditional Release Program at gmail.com, or flick me a DM on Twitter, and I will get to it. And just like Shane, we will have a chat about your criticism or your question, whatever it may be. And Jack, thank you for your time again.
We enjoy the battle of ideas, so just because you disagree with us, don't be shy about writing and telling us.
Yeah, that's right. All right. No, that's the way it needs to be. That's how you sort problems out. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you once again, listeners, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.